Chromakopia is an album about the impact of strong single mothers, the journey from toxic to healthy masculinity, confronting mortality and maturity.
You're an adult man.
Embracing a militant approach to artistic pursuits, the mask we use to hide ourselves, and mostly, Tyler the Creator's artistic synthesis and personal growth being put on the stage it deserves, and maybe winning another Grammy.
I'll be lonely with these Grammys when it's all said and done. Come on.
Chromakopia, 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 Chromakopia.
Random disclaimer. Hey, don't do anything that I say in this song, okay? It's fucking fiction. If anything happens, don't fucking blame me, white America. Fuck Bill O'Reilly. 4, 3, 2, 1.
If you've been even casually acquainted with rap in the past decade, or happen to be watching Adult Swim in the early 2010s, or have really paid any attention to pop culture at all in the last 20 or so years,
Your girlfriend look like my mom.
then you're already familiar with Tyler the Creator. At this point, I'd be concerned if you weren't. For the sake of giving this video some narrative structure though, let's start at the beginning. Tyler Okoma was born on March 6, 1991, to Benita Smith, a single mother in Hawthorne, California. Tyler met his father, at least according to his mom, only once at the age of 12, and this fatherless upbringing would have a lasting impact as a theme in his art. More on that later. Despite this, Tyler was not without a loving home, and with both his mother's support and her guidance in making him into a strongly independent person, he would begin his artistic career in a somewhat familiar place: Starbucks. In late 2007, the same year he would co-found Odd Future, Okoma began a 2-year stint as a barista, ending in early 2010, which he credits with being one of the most impactful moments that drove him to commit to his art full-time.
I hate you, Cindy.
Is Cindy aware of your success?
I hope her firing me was the greatest moment of my life.
Was it really?
Over those 2 years, he appeared on the debut Odd Future tape along with the rest of the collective, showing the direction that 2009's Bastard would ultimately go, with glimpses on songs like Dracula. When Bastard released, Odd Future's new wave marketing techniques, in other words a bunch of eclectic artists finding new and weird ways to promote their art, combined with the raw, angsty horrorcore that Tyler himself provided, got the attention of both fellow artists and fans alike.
They definitely do. Tyler, I really like, those Odd Future guys.
Ultimately landing the number 32 spot on Pitchfork's Top 50 Albums of 2010. It was around this time that the scale of Bastard's impact was starting to come into vision, that he got fired from Starbucks.
Bitch made me work the whole shift too and then told me sleazy bitch.
Yeah, he made the number 32 album of the year while slinging coffees and cake pops. Just remember, next time a barista messes up your order, that they might be making excellent art in their spare time and are merely forced to bide their time in a day job because the entertainment industry at large is a fuck and would rather sell us personalities to fawn over and attempt to relate with in a toxic, parasocial way than give shots to people who have vision and a commitment to their craft for the sake of making something good with intentional impact.
Dude, I love this art form so much, bro, and there's so many niggas out right now that aren't musicians that are getting treated like musicians because they make meme records or whatever. And I'm like, bro, this niggas out here that's really special, really aliens, really talented, really putting in the work. And y'all niggas giving this dip fuck who, these niggas publicly will be like, I don't give a fuck about music, I just do this shit for money, like.
Anyway, in Bastard, Tyler established a thematic, overarching story told across the span of 3 albums: Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf. While I'm not going to be getting too far into the details of this story, I would highly recommend taking a look at Tennis Tom's video on the subject, which is an impressive hour-long deep dive. But the thematic elements and tendencies I do want to point out about the Wolf trilogy that are relevant for this video are: A, Tyler's older artistic habit of hiding actual emotional venting behind shock value bars and the mask of a character being portrayed; B, the overt themes of radicalism, which heavily relate to Tyler's own perceptions of his relation to the music industry early in his career; C, the absolute teenage angst present in all 3 albums, largely stemming from a sense of not quite fitting in, and at least in part by the lack of a presence from Tyler's father in his life; And finally, D. Tyler's unyielding and uncompromising insistence on being authentic in the sense of making music that he wants to make.
I make what I like no matter what the fuck none of these niggas tell me, you feel me?
Which came to a head with mixed results on 2015's Cherry Bomb.
Because everyone hated it.
Over the 5-year run leading up to Cherry Bomb, Tyler and other Odd Future cast members had produced their own clothing line, popularized streetwear to a wider audience, started a sketch comedy series for Adult Swim, created their own yearly music festival, and directed a weirdly controversial Mountain Dew ad, which, especially given the modern context of what is judged as acceptable, is kind of laughable in hindsight.
Hey, you know, Piggy, that Jared fellow eats here a lot.
Not to mention the rise of other Odd Future members, such as Earl Sweatshirt with 2010's Earl, the debut of members Sid and Matt Martian's project The Internet in 2011, and Frank Ocean's 2012 Grammy-winning debut Channel Orange. With Wolf's successful release and the conclusion to the trilogy in 2013, the time seemed right to put out something new and different, as given Odd Future's seemingly unstoppable rise and the commitment of their fans, something more experimental could be given the attention it deserved. So, Tyler took this opportunity to release Cherry Bomb, and
Like, I opened a rap album with a rock song.
Yeah.
Most niggas is like, ugh. And then Buffalo comes, you can barely hear what I'm saying. Then Pilot come, and it's this 80s music, so they're out because they want rap.
As someone who was a big fan of Tyler at the time, but a bit too young to resonate with the general emotional artistic output of someone beginning to grow out of their initial foundations and into something larger, I remember liking the album in parts. I mean, I was already a punk fan, so Death Camp was right up my alley. I didn't quite get Buffalo at the time, even though in hindsight, reapproaching that song about 5 years later or so could have been a different experience, but that goes for the whole album. It's a weird and odd mix of old Tyler and what Tyler was becoming artistically, both in lyrical content and in production. The former largely remains focused on the same horrorcore and shock value bars we see on tracks like Buffalo, but on tracks like Pilot, it almost clashes with the production, which in contrast feels uniformly elevated and explorative. In Cherry Bomb, Tyler explores the full range of the production skills he had built across his first 3 albums, but we only really get glimpses of his fleshed out lyrical and vocal range, both as a singer and a rapper, on songs like Two-Seater, Smuckers, and Fucking Young Perfect. And critics responded to this with generally positive, but not earth-shattering praise for its improvements, while fans seemed to check out apart from their favorite handful of new songs after the initial hype had died down. At this point, Tyler could have played it safe, returned to his roots, made the abrasive horrorcore sound it seemed his fans were clamoring for more of, but he didn't. During the space between Cherry Bomb and his next album, Tyler kind of went side questing. I mean, literally, he got a show called Nuts and Bolts where he just kind of went and explored his interests in depth, which I think is genuinely awesome and something I wish more people had the opportunity to do before settling into any one thing for themselves. Anyway, the episodes released later and after the release of the album see him exploring things that would become much more familiar for him in the following years, like filmmaking, clothing design, and well, really design as a whole, with some outliers like space. Around 2017, Tyler's musical activity resurfaced with his feature on Frank Ocean's Biking, followed shortly by the teasing of a new album with the music video for the song Who Dat Boy, featuring A$AP Rocky, who Tyler had formed a friendship with.
Me and Rocky cuddle and watch Smack DVD.
I don't cuddle.
I be licking this nigga braids like,
I don't do that. That's not true.
I know you don't do that.
I do that.
That same night, in tandem with Who Dat Boy's streaming release, he includes the song 911 Mr. Lonely, featuring Steve Lacy, Frank Ocean, and Anna of the North. And just like that, a new era for Tyler had begun. Within a week, the album Flower Boy had been fully announced for release later that month, along with a full track listing. This kind of sudden and intentional rollout in the album's sense has become a kind of staple for this new era. And even at the time, it didn't disappoint, with songs like Ain't Got Time and Boredom being dropped in the lead up to the album. Flower Boy went on to be nominated for a Grammy, with its emotionally charged follow-up Igor securing the win in 2019, and with the completion of another trilogy of albums with 2021's Call Me If You Get Lost. With this culmination, Tyler went seemingly quiet for a while, focusing on other pursuits like fashion, film work, and theatric musical production. It would follow that, riding the second wave of meteoric success, Tyler would once again choose to swerve left when expected to turn right, a la Cherry Bomb. And in a sense, This year's Chromakopia fulfills that pattern, but not in the way you might think. Launching on October 16th, following the album's announcement, a partial video for St. Chroma, the album's introductory track, was dropped to Tyler's YouTube channel, followed by the video for Noid less than a week later on the 21st. Noid's video was accompanied by announcements for the tour and vinyl edition of Chromakopia, which, while seemingly only serving a marketing purpose, are worth a closer look later when we examine some of the prevalent themes of the album. Finally, 2 days before launch, the video for Thought I Was Dead is uploaded. And while fans are still discussing it, Monday morning brought the full release of the project, immediately shooting to occupy the top 14 spots on Spotify's charts. New and old fans alike have been overwhelmingly blown away by the project.
That's my goat. That's the goat right there.
And while critical acclaim is still a work in progress, Tyler's albums typically become better understood with time as more fans witness the concert performances and accompanying material to fully digest it.
And people will see that song live and see the energy, see how it felt, whether it's the fire, see how my legs move. And that song start gaining traction and popularity because it gave some people context. And a lot of people who didn't like that song said they saw it live and was like, damn, I understand it now. So when you're like, well, has your writing got better? Well, yes, because I've also gotten better musically. So for me, it's not just lyrics. I don't think I'm like a Earl Sweatshirt or like a Jay-Z or something like that. Yes. Like you gotta look at the whole thing when it comes to me.
So, is Chromakopia this era's cherry bomb? That remains to be seen. But what I can say so far is that it is certainly one of Tyler's most brutally honest and emotionally vulnerable albums to date. And where Cherry Bomb represented the beginning of an artistic evolution, Chromakopia, while displaying Tyler deep in his artistic bag, represents a more personal evolution and self-understanding, laid upon the foundation of a narrative thread in Tyler's life going all the way back to the beginning. Growing up as a boy without a dad, or without a dad who was fully present in your life, can have some terrifying results for the young men in question. But with a few slight variables, it can produce some extraordinarily well-developed and wholesomely masculine individuals. And for Tyler, one of the primary variables that turned him from the teenage angst-filled, rage-bait, bar-spitting, toxic in the name of being provocative, infamous figure of youth culture that he used to be,
what are you saying in your lyrics?
Nothing. Shit to piss old white people off like you.
into the emotionally vulnerable, fiercely independent, artistically driven, sexually liberated man we're currently familiar with was the strong character and deep wisdom of his mother. In Chromakopia, this influence is put front and center, with the spoken word pieces provided by his mom, with each accompanying song reflecting the deep impact that she had on Tyler, whether through advice, open conversation, or support and understanding, coming to a head in tone and explicit credit towards her effect on him in the vinyl exclusive track Mother. Her influence and push towards independence, both of thought and of means, shaped Tyler towards a well-rounded maturity, complete with new perspective on the toxic masculinity of his youth. And he isn't alone in that effect stemming from a single-mother household. While some, especially those with certain misogynistic ulterior motives, will point to the disadvantages and economic outcomes for children of single-parent homes, I would argue that in the specific case of single-mother households raising male children, there exists an increased tendency to produce more accepting and emotionally mature men. While this heavily depends on the character of the mother in question, and Tyler's mother is an exceptional example, being raised by a woman, especially one having to do so on her own, tends to foster a better developed respect for women by their sons. Seeing the work their mothers put in to raise them, combined with the resilience and independence that comes with the aforementioned economic disadvantages inherent to single-parent households, naturally produces men who are more willing to think critically, more willing to practice open understanding, and above all else, less likely to be misogynistic given the example provided by their mother. Now, this isn't to say that Tyler has never behaved in a misogynistic way, or that he was never toxically masculine. But given the thematic thread of maturity and personal growth present in Chromakopia, as well as the explicit credit towards his mother's influence, it's not hard to see who Tyler believes influenced him towards the acceptance of himself and others.
To my mother, you did a great job raising this guy.
However, Tyler wasn't always this way, and not every guy matures out of this edgy phase like Tyler did. With the absence of a father figure, many younger men turn to influencer or celebrity stand-ins that could wreak havoc on a young adult. For example, look at the way in which people like Andrew Tate, Steven Crowder, Nick Fuentes, hell even Sargon's Gamergate throwback ass, have detrimentally influenced young men seeking guidance for their inner struggles and turmoils. While he never quite came close to approaching the level of toxicity of the aforementioned names, in his early career, Tyler's signature provocative shock value and toxic trolling in his lyrics certainly reflected the so-called edgy atmosphere seen in quite a lot of younger Gen Z men now, despite being a millennial himself. Speaking on a personal note, even with somehow avoiding being sucked into Gamergate, the PewDiePie-fueled Ben Shapiro prevalence, the rise of incel culture, and the various other thinly veiled crypto-fascist culture war projects, despite being terminally online throughout all of these moments and movements, I still certainly more than dip my toes into edgy humor from probably the age of 14 to at least 20.
I don't like French people.
And in relating this back to Tyler, most people familiar with his history can identify about this age range, from the time he first began uploading videos online to about 22 or so, as the peak years of this somewhat performative toxicity. I say performative because as he matured into his mid-20s and now into his early 30s, Tyler has demonstrated that this toxic side was, if anything, purely a demonstration of some mix of teenage angst and the struggles of adjusting to the rapid increase in exposure he experienced in his late teens. While there was never any lack of authenticity in the emotion put behind Tyler's music, the shock value fueled expressions of misogyny or homophobia or other bigotry seem to have been centered not in genuine hate, but in a deeply personal struggle with Tyler's own sexuality, among other things. In Flower Boy, Tyler demonstrated the ability to communicate the struggle in a way that relays the increased emotional intelligence and self-understanding that the years between Cherry Bomb and its release had brought him. And on Chromacopia, the raw emotional vulnerability and willingness to turn deeply personal struggles with relationships, fame, and the lack of his father's presence in his life demonstrates the effect that the support, understanding, and openness of his mother and close friends have had on Tyler. I know it's cliche, but it's nevertheless important. The effect of having an open source of genuine conversation without judgment and support on a young man is invaluable in making sure they don't turn out to be the angry little shits we currently see sending outright sexual harassment in the DMs of any woman they see on social media in the wake of a certain orange bastard's re-election. Also, for the record, I'm not saying we should just talk it out with those types. I'm saying that the people in their life who actually give a shit about them should make the effort to try to put them back on the right path. Anyway, Tyler the Creator, despite his explicit run against the grain of being any kind of role model, displays the value of vulnerability and support for people struggling with emotional dysregulation or insecurity in guiding them into a self-assured, well-rounded, open, and emotionally matured adulthood.
When you're not afraid to be you, you're comfortable. When you're comfortable with yourself, you don't have that much hate in your heart, and you're not that quick to judge. When you're not that quick to judge, you're open to more things.
And in the case of young men, avoiding the pitfalls and inherent misery that accompany the current status quo of socially enforced toxic masculinity. There's a lot to be said as well for the profound effect that doing things in life that fulfill you and having the means to do so comfortably can have on anyone's mental health and outlook on life and other people, and talking about why Tyler turned out the way he did here, but I already made my big video on the economic plight of the country last month, so. Tyler's personal growth and journey into maturity over the years has been put on full display with each successive album post Cherry Bomb, and even on Cherry Bomb itself, there are inklings and gestures towards the path that Tyler was heading down in the end. And Chromakopia is no different in this aspect. However, what is unique to Chromakopia is the explicit and intentional recognition of this growth and maturity, both in an artistic and personal sense as well as in the literal sense of age. On the introductory Saint Chroma, Tyler says, and in this one line, although more of an allusion than a direct reference to his age, sets the tone for quite a few mentions of his maturity throughout the album. On Darling I, we get the first suggestion that Tyler's thoughts on his age in the moment are somewhere between fear and acceptance, as the track largely focuses on how he doesn't feel old enough to do things like settle down or start and build a family. And while the following Hey Jane touches upon the fears he associates with not being ready to be a father through the concept of an unplanned but not necessarily unwelcome pregnancy with a lover, as well as the partial exploration of women's perspectives on this as they themselves get older, it is on track 7's Judge Judy that we see Tyler confront the so-called elephant in the room when it comes to age: mortality. Both tracks present the theme of love's lost through the narrative lens of letters being exchanged. While Hey Jane sees Tyler and Jane going their separate ways due to the disruption of their honeymoon period by the unplanned pregnancy, Judge Judy sees Tyler reminiscing about an old flame that seemingly fit him perfectly, at least in the physical capacity. Only to learn that she had a terminal illness and has passed on. This theme of maturity and growth comes to a head on track 10's Tomorrow, with the second verse ultimately expressing Tyler's acceptance of both his increasing maturity and the fact that he is changing in more ways than one. Tomorrow is seemingly a funeral for what fans might refer to as old Tyler, and while it somewhat condemns the nostalgia of that era, it also puts forward a kind of acceptance of the fact that Tyler cannot prevent or fight his age and his growth. And his resolution is to live for today, even as he stresses over the proverbial tomorrow. Despite this, there's a presence on the album of some of the traits that define the so-called old Tyler era. While there's no hiding from the emotions displayed on the album for Tyler, the old habit of using masks to portray a character is on full display and is in fact a central theme of the album. His radicalism, now escalated into a militant fervor, remains present in his attitudes and views of the entertainment industry and the culture he resides in. While I wouldn't call it teenage angst, the album, much like his older music, is certainly a work of emotional venting, which he even explicitly stated in his recent Billboard interview. And finally, the ever-present artistic authenticity is alive and well on tracks like Ratata, Balloon, and Sticky. Also, speaking of Sticky, I would run through 1,000 brick walls for the Jackson State sonic boom of the South. Anyway, these older traits, despite Tyler's maturity and growth, are incorporated into the larger mature whole as simply things inherent to Tyler, even from the beginning. Tracks like I Killed You, with its double-layered exploration of Tyler's heritage and of a culture that he's had a complicated relationship with through the lens of a well-structured murderous narrative, horrorcore adjacent lyrics, and clever use of metaphoric expression for the way Tyler had initially tried to distance himself from his own cultural identity. Like Him, with its ultimate embrace of the emotional turmoil regarding the absence of Tyler's father, despite his public attempts to distance himself from that view in years since Answer, and Thought I Was Dead, with its emphatic rejection of the narrative that he is done, alongside a second verse that both takes accountability for Tyler's past, while also owning it in a cockier or semi-toxic way that is now, in his view, justified by his real-life growth and maturity, and proving time and time again that he isn't the person that those trying to quote-unquote cancel him attempt to paint him as anymore. All display a kind of synthesis between the parts of his past that made him artistically unique, as well as his deeper artistic bag, wizened perspective, and broader outlook that maturity has brought him. In other words, where Cherry Bomb represented a kind of awkward, pubescent growth spurt, Chromakopia, while still a transformative landmark in its own right, represents a maturity of mind, a new wrinkle of the frontal lobe built on another decade of experience that seems to have taught Tyler quite a lot, despite one of his outlooks in particular remaining thoroughly unchanged.
Sierra Delta, we may have a minor ACS fault here. Do you have anything on your scope? Sierra Delta, repeat.
I'm looking at fighter jets over I-95! How the hell did they get through?
Stand by, attempting to contact the nearest unit in that sector. All stations be advised. Satellite surveillance has been disabled.
More to life than
From the very beginning, Tyler's approach to art has been a kind of battle against the perceptions of others and the confining limits of the entertainment industry at large. Although he's shrugged off the ways in which he's been rejected or limited for being different, his approach musically has largely been defined in the post-Cherry Bomb era by this insistence on proving critics wrong about his limitations or range, to the point of an almost militant outlook on the industry.
It's always this chip that I've always had on my shoulder. That's weird, because it's like, I don't give a f. I'm gonna make what I want to make. But when they say shit that I'm like, you're wrong, that just sits right here. And I'm like, okay, you're dumb. Watch this.
Evidenced not only with his own personal actions and commitment to breaking industry boundaries, standards, and expectations, but also in the way he has simultaneously paid respect to cultural figures important in opening up more room for expression in the music space, as well as supporting artists younger than himself who were doing the same and broadening it further in his wake. This aggressive and uncompromising outlook on reshaping the music industry and the boundaries of fame itself is best featured on the album in the previously mentioned track, Thought I Was Dead, where the opening lines feature a soldier's cadence and the aesthetic conveyance of these militant values continues through the accompanying music video. And really, every piece of media accompanying the Chromakopia rollout, aside from perhaps Noid's music video. St. Chroma's visuals see Tyler marching a string of artists into a shipping container before blowing it sky high. The announcement video for the tour sees him marching the same brigade of musicians into a plane, accepting Lil Yachty as well as Louis Pastel and Felix of Paris, Texas, before also blowing up the plane. Side note, Tyler, if you happen to see this video and you want to, allow me to broaden my analysis by witnessing what will absolutely be a kick-ass live show with that set list, just get your people in touch with mine, man. Come on, I'll mosh to PT and you any night of the week, any fucking night. I'll be the shooter for all of you. And by that, I mean in the mosh sense, not in the gun sense. You don't want me on that one. I got an astigmatism. Getting back to the point, though, to really engage with and understand Tyler's militaristic outlook on the confines of the entertainment industry and the trappings of fame, we have to take a look at militancy itself. In the traditional sense, militancy outside of the realms of armies and conventional warfare most often results from a populist push to the brink. The most natural and relevant example of militarism for this video's purposes is the partisan movement present in Axis-occupied territories in World War II. Yeah, I know I mentioned something relating to World War II in my last video, but bear with me, I'm a nerd who grew up on History Channel and National Geographic in the early aughts. Anyhow, the partisan movement, united by association based on a mutual opposition to fascistic regimes, arose not so much out of purely ideological opposition to those regimes, but by general opposition to the forced conformity, political and social oppression, and at the end of the day, the lack of freedom inherent to these regimes. So too, in his early days, did Tyler assemble, if only by accident through mutual feeling, a collective of artists united by their desire to break the mold, so to speak.
I had the illest crew that trusted my ideas and my visions.
To take on the conventions of the music industry at the time and shape what would come after to accommodate their artistic expression by any means necessary.
I was like, okay, fuck, I'm gonna run this like a record label.
Guerrilla warfare becomes guerrilla marketing.
Man, you know what, fuck this. I'm gonna start a Tumblr.
Torching the barracks and taking the officers for hostage becomes winning a Grammy and then rightfully criticizing the Grammys for boxing you into the rap box for an album that crossed genre barriers routinely over its runtime.
It sucks that whenever we, and I mean guys that look like me, do anything that's genre bending or that's anything, they always put it in a rap or urban category. And I don't like that urban word. It's just a politically correct way to say the N-word to me.
And non-compliance or combat of fascistic laws and doctrines becomes non-compliance and combat of the term rapper.
But I'm not a rapper.
Or musician, reclaiming the more pure artist. To the partisans, their militancy was a matter of life and death, a struggle between freedom and oppression. And from Tyler's perspective, his artistic militancy is no different. His struggle against the conventions of the entertainment industry, the set path of a rapper, and the intense parasociality of fame, no less a matter of life and death to his own idea of what his life should be than fascism was for the partisans. Over the years, and especially on this album, Tyler has reaffirmed his belief that unless he has the room to fulfill his creative drive to its full extent and, in his own words, make shit, without the confines of expectations and industry standards, as well as the overbearing nature of overly parasocial fans, then the artistry is no longer pure or worth it. As with those limitations comes a lack of authenticity, which starts to get us to the core of what Chromakopia is really about.
I hope you find your way home.
From the moment the cover art for the album dropped, I had a feeling we were in for something different with this album. The mask of Tyler's own face provides an immediately striking visual, and it's not without purpose. Over the course of his career, whether through the split personalities expressed in Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf, or through the characters representing a somewhat hyperbolic version of Tyler's state of being in the titular Igor or Call Me If You Get Lost Tyler Baudelaire, Tyler has made the use of characters representing certain aspects of himself that he wants to express as a narrative device in his music. Given that, when I saw that this new character, Saint Chroma, wore a mask of Tyler's own face, I had a suspicion that this album would provide fans with something deeply introspective at the very least. My suspicions were ultimately blown out of the water by the end of my first front-to-back listen, and by the time I had fully digested the meanings behind the songs, I came to the realization that this album isn't just introspective, emotionally vulnerable, or deeply personal and honest. Neither is it simply another cherry bomb and representing a transition from this latest era of Tyler's work to whatever lies beyond. At its core, Chromakopia represents an honest self-assessment, and ultimately an artistic synthesis of what has always made Tyler great from the beginning, and the gained skills, wisdom, and perspective that his newfound maturity has brought. While Like Him is clearly meant to serve as an emotional climax to the album, I would argue that tracks 9 and 10, Take Your Mask Off and Tomorrow, represent the conclusion to the real message and theme that Tyler wants to convey through Chromakopia. On Take Your Mask Off, Tyler begins by tackling the theme of personal mask presented outwardly to hide one's true feelings. He provides the examples of someone entering a gang despite coming from a middle-class background in search of their perceived respect and prestige that comes with it. Someone burying their sexuality due to religious indoctrination and expressing bigotry out of insecurity, and of a mother and housewife to a wealthy man who longs for freedom from the responsibilities and trappings of that life. All of these examples are used to show the healthier and happier life that these people could have if they were truly honest with themselves, or as he puts it, takes their mask off. Finally, he addresses himself in the longest verse of the track. And I must make note here that to really understand the raw emotion behind these lyrics, a viewing of the live performance of the track, much similar to Like Him's case, will convey the true depth behind them. On this verse, Tyler confronts himself in no uncertain terms.
Let's talk about it, Tyler!
Addressing his struggle against maturity, his conflicting thoughts on creating clothing that his fans can't afford and the implications of that, his heavily implied attempt at breaking up a marriage that he's mentioned lyrically since and especially on Igor, as well as a slew of other perceived egotistical or inauthentic habits and behaviors, while also hinting at a struggle with what approaches imposter syndrome due to his anxiety surrounding fame and his feeling that the scope of his work won't truly be appreciated until he's gone. Ultimately speaking, the verse leaves on the implication that Tyler has made a personal decision to take his own mask off, project honesty, vulnerability, and authenticity, and create for the sake of creating. And while the song itself ends on this note, the following track, Tomorrow, resolves some of this with a kind of brutal honesty. While Tyler finds himself still uncertain about his path towards having a family, settling down, and growing into maturity, he comes at it from a perspective of acceptance. While he's still paranoid about what comes next, he fully accepts what is, that the old him is gone because he has been changed by the years and the perspective and experience that they've brought, even though he reaffirms that some things never change with renewed confidence on the following Thought I Was Dead. Tomorrow is about the acceptance and quiet contemplation that taking the mask off has brought Tyler, and ultimately, along with the preceding track, sets up the punctuation point on the album with the final 4 songs. These 4 tracks, Thought I Was Dead, Like Him, Balloon, and I Hope You Find Your Way Home, convey both a sense of finality and a thematic element of synthesis between elements of all eras of Tyler's artistic career. On Thought I Was Dead, Tyler is back to his confident, radical, combative self and doubling down on his artistic values and airing his frustrations with critics, fakes, and all manner of issues he sees with the entertainment industry. On Like Him, Tyler confronts his feelings about his father in an upfront and center way not seen since Answer, both uniting his past emotional conflict with his current emotional acceptance and addressing the feelings surrounding inadequacy he had struggled with and now has eschewed given he has become, quote, everything he strived to be without his father's presence, while also putting the vast leap in skill as a producer he's had since Answer on full display in an emotionally charged ballad. On Balloon, Tyler lyrically and musically expresses how strongly he values authenticity, and his featuring choices, Doechii and Daniel Caesar, speak volumes in conveying this message, while handily delivering a point that has been central to Tyler's success from the outset. Finally, in I Hope You Find Your Way Home, Tyler brings the entire 4-track run full of synthesized elements from across the span of his career to an end by doubling down on Chromakopia's main themes, practically summarizing how the album represents a point of finality before a transition to a new Tyler. Over the course of the 4 tracks, Tyler displays a synthesis of his artistic bag, values as an artist, and themes that have defined his work from the beginning up until his most recent 3 albums. In doing so, Tyler conveys an underlying point to the central theme of maturity and growth, the idea of an accumulated totality to the self. And using themes, styles, and sounds from the full scope of his career in the album's final 4 tracks, Tyler shows that despite his age and despite his transformations, pieces of his old self that have become ingrained into who he is as a person live on and continue to impact him going forward. Maturity, after all, is not as simple as becoming your adult self at a certain age. We are, in the end, made up of pieces of our past, of our friends, of our families, of our lovers, and of our experiences. I don't mean to slip into an exploration of the ship of Theseus or anything, but even if unintentionally, Chromakopia conveys an underlying theme in expressing the reality of our amalgamated selves of synthesis, that we are different from when we started, but in some ways still the same. Although Tyler insists that the old him is dead, artistically and stylistically, some aspects of that version of himself and the experience gained in those moments in time live on, synthesized into the Tyler of the present moment. But wait, no, that can't be it, can it? All of Tyler's albums have a narrative, some story to express across the scope of the tracks, and I know there's gotta be one here somewhere. Wait a minute. Who do we know that stalks? Who do we know that lurks in the shadows, watching, waiting, plotting? Who else could give the illustrious Saint Chroma this deep sense of paranoia and fear but none other than Ace? Embodying all of the darker urges and themes in Tyler's work, Ace demonstrated a strong tendency towards stalking in She and Sarah, and given the nature of Saint Chroma's persistent and unseen watcher put on full display in the video for Noid, it would make sense, even thematically, for this to be Ace. Well, why? Apart from the fact that Tyler is still clearly impacted by various elements of his past, the way in which his often toxic youth has been continually brought up against him has been as persistent as haunting, and in the literal sense, Ace, Tyler's old alter ego used to express these almost compulsively violent thoughts, can be seen as a literal interpretation for the way Tyler's past has insistently followed him forward, even with the attempts to shake himself of this past, to shake Ace from his shadows, he still follows, watches, and induces a deep state of paranoia that Tyler both fears and understands as a product of himself. But that's just a theory, a game theory. While it'd be unwise to think this album is the last we'll see of Tyler, I do at least feel that, at a minimum, Chromakopia represents the last we'll see of this Tyler. And after experiencing an album that delivers the full breadth of Tyler's skill as a musician and growth as a person to beautiful effect, I'm more than satisfied with it being the conclusion of this latest era of Tyler's work. With its absolutely peak level of production, brutal lyrical and emotional honesty, and raw and complete openness, Chromakopia will go down as undoubtedly the most authentic, inspired, and refined version of Tyler we've seen thus far. And with his climactic insistence on continuing down this path of growth, it is really only that. The best we've seen Tyler at in the personal sense so far. In summary, if you're already a fan of Tyler the Creator and have been following him over the years, noticing the changes in his style and level of personal growth, then this album delivers an emphatically new chapter in his story, and a new height in his growth as an artist. If you clicked on this video knowing nothing about Tyler though, I hope it inspires you to give the art an honest listen, as given his stature and trajectory, you're not going to want to miss out on wherever this goes from here. Until next time, this has been Das Mystical, signing off. Auf? What am I, fucking German?
Chromakopia green, like pickle Rick. Chromakopia, I've got the cold, I'm pretty sick. Mocha Starbucks, coffee, hot brown drink. Coffee, 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 I need to drink my coffee. Pickle Rick, pickle Rick, motherfucker. Everyone to say, hey Tyler, drop music. Well, I dropped music, here is my music. Ba, 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 ba.